is not how you have success in the league. So if they want to pay him whatever that they're going to pay him, like we're going to continue to watch the Dallas Cowboys talk about, remember that one time where I won Super Bowls, while they continue to not be good.
How about
Welcome in to the Paydirt Profile Podcast. This is episode 3. We're getting this thing down. We got all the equipment up. We got video number 2. Today we're going to get into some topics in regards to the CBA that just got signed today. We're going to talk a little bit about some topics given to us from some listeners, talking about some of the free agents that are coming up, some of the new destinations that they'll be on. Before we get started, we want to let all our new listeners know that they can find us where all their podcasts are found, at Google Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. If there are other places that you listen to that you'd like us to upload, let us know via email, or you can hit us on Twitter. You can find us Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, or join a Facebook group by searching the name The Paydirt Profile. If you have any questions, you can also email us at thepaydirtprofile@gmail.com. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, we had a couple of big-time text messages or tweets, I should say. Big news, we had Ryan Tannehill getting signed by the Tennessee Titans. The deal is probably going to be around 4 years, $118 million. Who here thinks that's a good idea?
not the Dolphins?
Crickets.
Yeah, crickets.
Nah. No, it's not good. Most like all the other quarterback signings that are done based on very little production and they're more team contracts than anything.
Yeah, I just don't understand how you go from being the backup for half the season to, and he played really, really well, but in half a season, he somehow earned 4 years and $118 million, $29.5 million a year.
Did it say how much was guaranteed?
I didn't see that, and we'll check it. We'll check that while we're talking and see if we can find that.
Most of it was on the back of Derrick Henry, though. He carried that team down. He carried the Titans down.
$62 million guaranteed.
Stop.
Should have saved that for Henry.
$20 million as signing bonus.
That's ridiculous. So the thing is that when this news came out, these dudes know how I feel about Ryan Tannehill, so I kind of erupted. So I'm being a little bit more calm right now. But when you're looking at a guy who could be considered a quote-unquote franchise quarterback, it should be a guy who can carry your team when the chips are down. It should be a guy that when there's injuries around you or when players around you are making less money or making more money, I should say, and you have less talent, that this guy can kind of carry you to the promised land if things aren't perfect around him. At no point in his entire career has Ryan Tannehill ever been that dude. We're looking at a guy who had a strong finish to the last season, and kudos to him for that. I think he deserves to be paid more than, bottom of the barrel starter or backup money. I think he definitely deserves more than that. But to pay a guy top of the market or pretty close to top of the market value is completely insane given what you're trying to do with your team. Your team vastly overachieved last year. They kicked, what was it, like one field goal in their last 6 games or something along those lines. They had completely unsustainable red zone efficiency. They had completely unsustainable metrics when it came to completions, and it came to yards after the catch, and it came to air yards, and all of those things. You're going to get a tick back in all of those things, and you might not keep Derrick Henry. And then you're going to assume that your defense is going to be the same. You're going to assume that you're going to have the same luck as far as your division and who you're playing. It's completely asinine to think that this guy deserves this kind of money. And unfortunately for the Tennessee Titans, if they don't make it back to the playoffs and have the success that they had this year, like it's going to be a failure for them. And I don't understand where this kind of comes from or what this does for them going forward. This is the type of deal that you give to a guy who's been on your roster for years and years, and you know what, it's a, hey, thank you for doing what you've done for us in the past, and we're paying you now to kind of make up for it. He was there for, half a year as a starter. I don't understand. 10 games. 10 games.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where the quarterback is considered the most important player, but they did a lot of good things with him that they weren't always doing with Mariota when he was in. Mm-hmm. And like you said, he wasn't carrying the team. He hasn't done anything for the franchise. And how you define success for him going forward these next 4 years, if he's with the team for 4 years, he's got to get past that conference championship, which will be a Super Bowl. He's got to take you to the Super Bowl. I don't think that's reasonable. Given his success, he was so good that his college coaches played him at receiver.
Right.
Guys around him every day didn't think he was as good enough to start early in his career. He can get better, but those guys, they know what they're doing.
I completely agree with what Dante said. Like, he is a guy that, yes, you can pay him, you can keep him on your roster, you can have him as your starting quarterback. But at $29.5 million a year with $60 million guaranteed, when you have Derrick Henry, who rushed for 1,500 yards last year,
that they don't want to pay apparently,
and powered you through, like literally powered you through the playoffs and leading up to the playoffs. Like, I just feel like that's a waste of cap space, a waste of money. Like, pay him. If you got him at $20 million a year, cool. I can see that. That's an acceptable rate for a guy. Like, it's still inflated to me. Like, you think he got cut from the Dolphins last year.
The team that everyone cuts Fitzpatrick, they just handed the team over to him.
Yeah.
And no one wants that guy.
Yeah.
He's been on how many teams in that division? All of them.
all the teams in the NFL almost.
And they just let him walk. It's tough.
Yeah. I don't get how it's the same thing that my Vikings did with Kirk Cousins. Like, how do you, and what I tell these guys all the time, how do you pay a quarterback so much of your cap space? You only get so much cap room, and you look at the price of an Aaron Donald, you look at the price of the top offensive lineman, which there's a lot going into free agency this year, top offensive lineman,
including one of theirs,
and you just gave tons of cap space to a decent quarterback. You can get 2 Aaron Donalds for the price of 1 Ryan Tannehill.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That is insane.
In a cap space sense.
Yeah.
That's insane.
And to be fair to Ryan Tannehill, he did get traded, not cut.
Okay.
He got traded, and they restructured his contract to where he would make $7 million this past season, and with incentives up to $12 million. So he definitely deserves that pay cut, like you said, Tony, or pay increase, like you said, Tony, to 20 million, 21, 22,
18.
18
give him an extra
tops.
year, but that's rough.
Yeah.
Let him do it again.
Yeah.
If he does it again, if you can do it again next year, cool. We'll give you the same program up to 17 million or 15 million with incentives. You do what you did last year again, cool. Then we're talking about a $30 million contract.
Why couldn't they have franchise tagged him? Do they have franchise tag candidates that I don't know of, or maybe they're saving that for Derrick Henry or somebody on the defense? But like, if you franchise tag him and he makes $30-something million
for 1 year.
For 1 year, you are still in a position to negotiate next year. Maybe you're in a Dallas Cowboys situation like with Dak Prescott, but I don't think that Tannehill has the talent that Dak does or the intangibles that Dak does. But if you do that, how much different is that this year to the, however many guaranteed at signing that he was offered? Like, it would have made more sense long term for your team to just bite the bullet, franchise him this year, take that huge cap hit, but then be able to have the flexibility 2 or 3 years down the road. If they stumble onto a quarterback, like let's say they get a guy like a Gardner Minshew where you had no desire for him to be the dude, but now all of a sudden he's playing like a tick under what Tannehill does, like
for a rookie contract.
For a rookie contract, like you're looking at what the Jacksonville Jaguars have with Nick Foles. Like they are trying to trade him at all costs because that contract that they gave him was garbage. It was garbage at the time. It's garbage now, even for a Super Bowl winning quarterback. And now you have a guy on a rookie deal that's either going to sit there and rot when you know that he can play, or you're going to have to try to trade Tannehill or trade Nick Foles and have a huge dead cap hit. And I think the Titans could be in the same situation down the road. So
well, if they can let Tannehill stay and play what he was doing running the football, but what a lot of teams do, they'll pay these guys who made their money running the football, and then they don't let him run the ball because they have so much invested. Mm-hmm. If they can keep similar game plan, he might have a chance to be successful. Get yourself a backup, similar skill set, and go from there. But a lot of times they take them out of the run game, and they want him to win games, which he was never doing in the first place. So, I mean, only time will tell. But, like, I would agree. Franchise, give him a year franchise, prove it again, and then, I mean, then 30 mil, almost 30 mil is not bad.
Sign that man first. You made it because of him.
Yeah.
right.
So why would he not be your top priority?
Because running backs don't matter in this league. People want to be hipsters so much and say running backs don't matter. All these metrics show like you can make any numbers that you want work and fit your argument. I can sit here and tell you quarterbacks don't matter and give you a myriad of reasons why, and it would be absolutely insane. It would be a dumb argument, like at its core, but like I could make a compelling argument that quarterbacks don't matter. We'll probably do that at some point just to show people like it's about building your team. We talked about it in the first podcast. Having an offensive line, having a defensive line, having strong coaching, having, a strong culture, getting lucky. But, like, at the end of the day, a quarterback is not going to make or break your team, if everything else around him is not also quality. So, we also had some news. Calais Campbell was traded from Jacksonville to the Baltimore Ravens. They're in a little bit of dire straits when it comes to the cap. That compensation was a 5th-round pick. That pick was acquired via trade for a kicker to my man Tony's Minnesota Vikings. That kicker they cut after three weeks. How do you feel about that one?
Dude, who trades for a kicker? Like, come on. I don't care the prospect this guy is supposed to be. You don't draft a kicker in the 2nd or 3rd round, whatever Tampa did the other year, and you don't trade. I mean, it's a 5th-round pick, sure, who really cares, but, like, I'll give you a 7th-round pick for a kicker, but, like, a 5th round, you could still find a steal in there, and for a kicker, and you could have got Calais Campbell. You're telling me like, that exact same pick, our front office could have just said, hey, we want Calais Campbell instead, like, and gotten Calais Campbell for a 5th-round pick instead of a kicker we cut.
But that's why some of these franchises are perennially good. They're able to make moves like this while teams like the Jaguars are signing Nick Foles and then getting rid of Calais Campbell and all the other ones. Talk about the Browns and they're all over the place. But the teams that are good are going to stay good because they're able to do stuff like this. Ravens are well built, and they only got better with Calais Campbell coming in town.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Calais is still relevant?
Oh, he's gonna help that defense, I think, for sure. They'll probably slide him inside a little bit, play 5 or 4-eye, and he's gonna help him quite a bit.
He's a force for sure. Like he's massive no matter what. But
he's a proven veteran.
Yeah.
A team like that who is the 1 seed, I wouldn't expect him to fall off very much. This next season, especially on defense. Mm-hmm. And they're only going to get better on offense with Lamar still in his rookie deal.
Right. So, all right. So, what we kind of wanted to do today was get a little bit into discussions about the collective bargaining agreement. Basically, everybody is talking about it, so we're not going to try to get too in-depth on the details but kind of want to just discuss some of the changes that they're going to bring about more of the next 10 years. The vote was very, very close one. There are people on both sides who were vehemently opposed to it. There are people on the other side who thought it was going to be a good bargain. The tally of the votes was 1,019 to 959, so I think it was one of the closer ones that we've seen. It's not going to affect the league year. We're still going to start it on March 18th, but I'll turn it over to Tony to talk about some of the finer points of it, and then we'll go and circle back and talk about each point individually.
Yeah, so I mean the biggest things with the new CBA, we got the number of playoffs teams increasing from 12 to 14 as early as this season. I think that's going to be a crazy change to how playoffs work, how the end of the regular season works. Obviously, one of the biggest sticking points of the CBA was that the regular season is going from 16 to 17 games as soon as 2021. There would also they would get rid of a preseason game and make the fourth preseason game a bye week, so you have a week rest going into the regular season. Rosters would increase from 53 to 55, and game day active rosters will increase from 46 to 48. This one's kind of like, it could be not a big deal, but it also could be really interesting. Could see what these coaches do with those two extra players. And then just kind of a fun one just to talk about is the players making minimum salary get $100,000 bump in their salary. I think, just if we see any negatives in that, or if it's just awesome for those young guys. But yeah, we can start at the top and just go into the biggest one. To me, the biggest heavy hitter is jumping from 12 to 14 teams in the playoffs. What do you guys think?
I think that having more teams in the playoffs are going to give you some pros and cons. A pro is you're going to have teams that were right there on the bubble who might be able to make some noise. I think we see every couple of years there is a division where you have three juggernauts, where you have one team that's going to get a bye and one team that's going to be a double-digit win team, and then the third team is trying their mightiest to make it, but they had to face those two juggernauts. And then sometimes you have that outlier fourth team that finishes 8-8 or 7-9 or 9-7 that was right there on the cusp, but they had to play 6 division games against some of the better teams. So I think having that extra team might benefit those scenarios. But on the other side of the coin, like, you're going to have equal amounts where you're going to have somebody squeak into the playoffs where there's a team that has no business being in the playoffs. Like the Pittsburgh Steelers would have been one of those teams this year that might have been able to squeak into the playoffs. Like a team without Ben Roethlisberger, a team where they weren't committed to giving James Conner the ball frequently enough. When he was getting the ball, he couldn't stay healthy, unfortunately. They improved on defense, but they were a team that were winning games against bad teams, and they were staying afloat, and they tried and they fought admirably. But like, if they had been in the playoffs, that would have been a travesty. Like, we wouldn't have wanted to watch that game. Could you imagine if the Pittsburgh Steelers had been the Tennessee Titans of this this season, and they knocked off a team like the Patriots or something along those lines? Like, at least Tennessee had a winning formula. Like, we talked about Ryan Tannehill not deserving $29 million, but that doesn't mean he doesn't deserve $20 million or 19 or 21 for what he did. He played well. They were a team that you could see doing what they did. We have teams like Pittsburgh Steelers or 7-9 teams that start to squeak in. I think it would kind of affect the integrity of what they're trying to do in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think you'll probably get a mix of both. Some season, or some, you could even be year to year. You're getting some of those 10, 11 win teams not making it. That would now make it give that 2 seed a nice run in the first round. But also, like you said, you're gonna get a 7-9 team in at some point, and no one's gonna be happy about it. 2 seeds who, puts a premium on being the number one seed in the conference. But it's a long season, and just to throw someone in who's not even winning games, it's tough. It's tough to see because, the 2 seed, they might have same record, they lose a tiebreaker, and all of a sudden they've got to play another week in the playoffs just to get by against someone who doesn't even deserve to be there.
I don't know. I'm a fan all the way around.
Yeah, I mean, money's got to be money.
Mr. Chargers.
Easy. That's real loud. My bad. But yeah, I mean, the Chargers are having a slump right now. But I mean, they're constantly kind of in that region of like wild card. Unless they're doing really, really well, that's where they're at. So they're kind of, except for last year, let's be real. But they're kind of on the cusp. But I feel like if you're one of these juggernaut teams, right, if you're playing well all season, if you play some 7-9 team, there should be no change in the result. You should be able to knock them out. So you shouldn't be that worried about a 7-9 whatever team getting in, right? So I don't know. It's just more football for me. So I'm excited about it. I hope it turns out well.
I think it's really interesting because it kind of provides the opportunity, for better or worse, of like that underdog mentality team. A team that finds a Ryan Tannehill and cruises through. Let's say they were in a better division, like they played really well last year towards the end of the season. Derrick Henry deserved to be in the playoffs. It gives that opportunity for that team to come in and potentially make some waves. Who knows? They obviously they made it last year, but they were in a division that they could do that.
Right.
And so it's interesting to me to everybody likes jumping on that underdog mentality, or you have your starting quarterback go down at the start, halfway through the season or something, and then there's this rookie kid that, a Gardner Minshew that comes in and everybody wants to jump on the Minshew train. It allows for that. And to me, honestly, I kind of like it because it's like one more fluky team that could take down the Patriots.
To piggyback on that though, when you look at those divisions, I mean, the Patriots are a great team, right?
Yeah.
But I'm constantly looking at their division and being like, I mean, the Bills did great this year.
Yeah.
For being the Bills, but
right.
I'm constantly looking at that and I'm like, no shit, they're gonna make the playoffs every year. They play these trash teams twice,
right.
So.
Yeah, it's fun for me at least. I enjoy seeing those juggernaut teams just kind of fall apart in the playoffs. Like the Baltimore Ravens. How did you get beat last year?
Yeah.
You guys should have walked through.
Yeah.
And there's more opportunity for that.
But to be fair, were any of us holding our breath for a Super Bowl to watch Ryan Tannehill?
Absolutely not.
Nah.
I was praying.
It's like a cool story, but they beat a bad Patriots team. They beat the Ravens, who look extremely rusty. But no one was cheering to see Ryan Tannehill hand the ball off.
Yeah, if you didn't live in Tennessee.
Well,
if you're not in Tennessee or somehow a Tennessee fan for some reason, you're not praying to see them. It's a cool story, but
it's another. The point you brought up is not as many teams get that bye week either. I mean, the Ravens would have been on the bye no matter what, but there's that second seed team that's no longer on the bye, and there isn't going to be that two rusty teams going in to that second round of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. I think the one thing or two things that we can take from this is debate shows are going to be able to find one side or the other as the victor year after year. It's going to depend on who makes it in or who doesn't make it in. If we have additional two teams that make it in and they're deserving, then they're going to say that this is a great idea. If we have two teams that have no business being in the playoffs, they're going to say, see, I told you so, this was awful. The one thing that I would like to reiterate what Jamar said is it's extra football, and it's extra football in the sense that the final week of the season doesn't matter for a lot of teams. Now it's going to matter. It's going to matter so much more for a couple more teams where, I have that number one seed locked up. Well, do you? okay, like, but that number 2 seed though, where they were like, oh, I'm content because I have a bye, not anymore. So like now maybe you're gunning for that number 1 seed a little bit more. Maybe that number 1 seed needs that little extra push, so maybe they keep their foot on the gas a little bit more. Those teams that are on the cusp, maybe they're gonna push a little bit more because I mean you see the teams and not too many teams are openly trying to tank. It's hard to tank in football. There's too many players that can influence the game. But when you have a team that's 6-6 halfway through 12 games, they're like, okay, maybe we can still do this. Maybe we can still make it instead of like, oh, let's close up shop and try to, plan for next year. So I do think you'll be able to see a couple of benefits that way.
NFL Red Zone Week 17 is going to be fire.
Oh yeah,
the thing that's going to change
football Week 17?
Change fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who makes it to that last week.
Yep.
The finals, and you have the best players, and they're probably on good teams.
Mm-hmm.
And they start sitting out, and you're losing season-long championships because your team was too good.
Yep.
It sucks, but everyone, like you said, might be playing a little more, into that final couple weeks, and I hate it when you get to the final, when you get there and you lose to someone who's got guys scrubs just getting weak garbage time stuff,
mm-hmm.
and I mean maybe it'll help that a little too.
That's an interesting take on a segue into the 17-week season potentially coming as soon as 2021.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do for fantasy? When do you start playoffs? Do you bump it back that one more week and parlaying on players? Like one of my biggest things is like, are players going to get wore out? Are players going to get hurt more? Are you going to have starters? Now you got an extra playoff game, you got an extra game in the regular season. What's your guys' take on, is it good or bad?
I'd like to see it stay at 16. I think it's plenty already. You're able to find out for the most part who's the best. Obviously, it would just be a money thing. You get one more week of games for everyone, we get more money. But you still want to see those guys fresh in the playoffs. So you'd have one team who gets an extra bye, but now we have 6 teams in each conference who've played an extra game already, have to play another extra game. So it would just come down to money for those guys, which it is about making money. But you still want to get, at the end of the season when it matters, you want to have good product. You'd hate to see star players getting hurt just because you got an extra game.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to say it again. More football is good for me. I love it. I see that, there's an aspect of players possibly, being injured, which of course no one ever wants. I think it kind of puts another extra spin on the game, though, that it's going to force teams to kind of reevaluate their teams and kind of think about like, all right, like I want to sit this person, but at the same time, I still want to win, right? So I'm not just going to have another bum behind that person. Like I want to find another dude who's like a 6-man in the NBA. Like, all right, I can put you in. You're going to do, some good things, and then I'm going to take you out. So I don't know. I think it throws a positive spin on it.
That's part of that bigger roster size, too. Yeah. I'd actually like to see it even a little bigger. Maybe 2 more.
Yeah.
And I think the good teams are going to be able to figure out where they want those guys, whether it's going to be special teams players, more specific to return game, covering stuff. Or you're going to get a really specialty type players like Taysom Hill, who can get into the offense a little bit, or, speed receivers or special running backs. Guys who can do very specialized stuff, but you're able to keep them on your roster week in and week out instead of having to force them into a role. As long as they can help the team out, I think it would be probably pretty good. Even if there's not more games, I'd like to see more active players. Keep that third quarterback active, and go from there.
Yeah, and I completely agree with both your guys' points. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to need to find ways to safely usher in this era of new games. You're looking at potentially 2 more games a season. You're looking at increasing the active number of players. I don't see why your active roster of 55 can't be your game day active roster of 55. I don't see why you need to have inactives, like you forced inactives. It doesn't make that much sense to me. To have the majority of your players that are practicing with you and are going to be able to be utilized on game day would definitely alleviate some of the concern about having that linebacker playing those 100 snaps a game, or the running back. They're already going to committees, with running backs, but you have committees with D line, like people have their situational pass rushers, they have their run stoppers. Obviously, you have your nickel guys. A lot of the players who are making rosters and being able to affect the game are the linebackers, the extra D linemen. You have additional receivers that might be able to play for you, be gunners, playing special teams, things of that nature. I think that aspect is good for the game, but really that 17, as far as fantasy football is concerned, you're gonna have to move it back. I don't think there's any reason for you not to utilize the entire season. And if they are going with wider spread rosters with more players, that just means more variance in the players that you're going to have week to week in fantasy. So daily fantasy, I think, is going to definitely be affected by that 17 games. I think it's going to be affected heavily by that extra player or two, just because it's one or two more players that you have to worry about on a week in, week out basis, and it's one more player that might take away some usage from somewhere. So I think it's going to be interesting for fantasy football and really good for real life football.
Yeah, I think with the 17 game season and because right now my fantasy, our championship week is week 16. Mm-hmm. So, with 17 and only 2 teams per division getting a bye week, like, you might actually be able to bump that championship week to week 17.
Right.
And now you're getting an extra week to make that last push into the playoffs as a fantasy player, and you get to celebrate your championship at the same time that your team is making the playoffs, or stuff like that. Like, it adds an extra. It's a conversation for every fantasy league. Like, what do you do? Do you wait a year, or you just go gung ho on it year one and see what happens? I think for me, I agree with Kyle and Dante of, like, the active roster why not just make everybody active? I've been in a lot of, for those of you who don't know, I freelance for the NFL. I film games on weekends, work on Hard Knocks and All or Nothing, and so I've been in a lot of meeting rooms. I've been in, with a lot of teams, and I think I've seen so many coaches fighting for players to be up on an active roster, and this allows them, for one particular reason or not. Like, they have a specific play or a specific coverage that they need this, but because their starting offensive lineman's hurt, they need that extra offensive lineman to come in instead of bringing that corner or bringing that Taysom Hill style player up to cause some energy. I think it's interesting. It'll be an interesting transition to see how coaches make the best of it.
Yeah, I think the good teams are going to figure it out. The bad teams aren't, and it's not going to change too much. Unless you're able to get some more young guys, some extra reps here and there, say be an extra tackle on a couple, some different sets, or a fifth receiver or DB type. I think it could work well.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting too to see from an injury perspective, because a lot of teams play this game of, like, oh well, our starting tackle, he could play. We're gonna keep him up because he's, like, right on the brink, but we're gonna bring our extra lineman up with us as well, like, and in a sense it could push injured guys into the game more, knowing that they have backups coming, instead of like it could do the opposite from an injury perspective. Instead of saying, hey, no, you have to be down because we don't have a backup for you. Like if you're only 50% gonna play the whole game, we got to keep you down and let Joe Schmo come up. But now they can be like, well, let's see what happens. And it'll be interesting, and then see how they play, and if you need to pull them, you can pull them, but
without ruining the roster construction for the week.
Exactly.
You'd have the extra security.
Yeah, I think coaches are gonna love that. And then so that was kind of 2 in 1, but we can talk about just the extra $100,000 for the young guys, for guys who are on minimum salary and practice squad guys, stuff like that. What are your takes?
I think it's going to be really positive for them. Obviously, having more money is always great. But when you're looking at who you can sign and who you can't sign, the age of each one of these prospects, like, you're going to be able to see guys stick around for a decent amount of time and be able to be a lower tier player and not fall out of the league because they are overvaluing their talents. Like, you see guys that this guy deserves this amount of money. He's going to get the big bucks. So you axe those out of the equation. Then you see the guys who are like, this person has talent either via scheme or via, what their athleticism is and their age. So we're projecting whatever it is. So we're going to give those guys money. You can axe those guys out. Then you have the guys who, are going to, maybe they're on a second contract. You know that they fit your scheme, but you don't necessarily want to give too much money to them. Those guys that are always on the bubble, that maybe they try to get a little too much money, so then teams kind of go elsewhere. Now that they will have a higher floor, maybe they're not trying to shoot for the moon. Maybe they can stick on as guys that can help a team out instead of being like, you know what? Your career is basically over because you priced yourself out of the market. We're just going to find a rookie. I think that those guys might be able to find an extra year or two on their career because they're not pricing themselves out of pure necessity. So, I mean, outside of just getting more money, I think that's going to be beneficial for them too.
Yeah, I think, the money thing, I don't know how many people are actually going to be affected roster to roster. There's going to be a few, so it's not going to ruin any cap space, which also went up. But I actually would have liked to see some sort of partnership with the XFL, some sort of two-way type contracts like the NBA does with their G League. I didn't see anything or hear anything about that, but especially where you could work some quarterback and practice squad guys down to those XFL games, whether each conference gets to put their own guys on a certain team or whatever it would be, but to get those practice guys some more time, more exposure, because if you go to 17 games, you take away that fourth preseason, which it was a young guy game for sure. Unfortunately they canceled the season, which I thought would have been a great time to keep it going, even if it was just the players. With no it's the only thing on. Really get some more exposure for the league. But you could see some guys like the third quarterback, guys who do need some work. A guy like Duck Hodges, who before he got thrown into the starting role, could have been a guy maybe you would like to see play more in an XFL type game, just to get the experience. But those practice squad guys, they don't get a lot out of having to sit every week. And I'm sure a lot of those guys would like to kind of go back and forth if they could to get some actual meaningful game reps, even if it's not in the same scheme. Reps are reps for those guys. And if you take the fourth one away, you're gonna lose some of the exposure for sure.
Yeah, I don't see any negatives with it, really. I think it's a great opportunity for those lower level, kind of rookie or, entry level type guys. But I'm curious to see how it ends up or how it turns out.
Yeah, I think they're stoked for those guys. They're gonna make an extra $100,000 a year, and why?
Yeah.
We would all take it.
I mean, extra money for free. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Sign me up.
At the end of the day, like, you're a practice squad guy. You're on the roster guy, and like you're just doing practice, and you're in sweats on the sideline for a game. Like you just got $100,000 bonus. I'm signing yes every day. And granted, those, and that's the toughest part with those guys is there's no consistency as well. So you could be on a roster and then you could be cut because somebody got hurt, and now that guy's on IR, and so even you divide that 100,000 across 17 games now or 16 games, like you're still talking an extra $8,000 a week or something, that's huge. Like that's great during the season, even if you only play 3 weeks. Like
right.
you're talking another $24,000 that these guys got paid, and can hopefully they're financially sound and don't just go spend it on a car or something. But
don't waste it.
Yeah.
You put into some training, off-season training that maybe you wouldn't have been able to do.
Right.
Yeah.
To improve yourself.
I think, and Kyle's idea of the XFL like transition, I think that would be really interesting and really good to see. And there's a lot that would go into it, obviously, but on the most base level of just like getting these guys game reps and really, a lot of the coaches in the XFL are all ex-NFL coaches
right.
who, if you're like, the Renegades are, the XFL team of my Vikings, like Zimmer's gonna be like, Jim Zorn, frickin' like run my scheme,
right?
Put this guy through, like they can all do it. They all know the offense that the team would run. So
and you would be watching. Hey, that's our minor league team, or kind of. They're not gonna have all 32, but say the Vikings and the Chargers and the Falcons, the Cardinals, they are all part of the Renegades or whatever teams they have. Mm-hmm. You'd be more inclined to turn it on.
Definitely.
Instead of just saying it's just game doesn't matter. But that would be cool to see.
Well, good. I mean, that's our coverage of the CBA. I mean, I know that we're gonna get a lot more back and forth. Right now with no sports being on, all you really can talk about is football and free agency and some of these changes. So I'm sure we'll reiterate and come back to some of these the things over the next few pods. What we want to get into now is we had a couple of listener questions or listener topics. It was really great that we were able to get these started. It would be a great thing that we can continue to do every couple podcasts or so. So what we're going to start out with first, we have a question from Rick Daniels on Twitter. His question was, should Derek Carr be released by the Raiders or have a quarterback to replace him this year? Or should they just look toward trying to upgrade the overall talent of the team? Jamar, you got insight on this one?
The Boo-Boo Raiders.
It's coming from a Charger fan.
Yeah, sorry. Derek Carr, I still think he's a decent quarterback. He had a good year, or a decent kind of year last year. I think he had like 4,000 yards, a little over 20 touchdowns, and maybe 8 picks. I think they should focus more on building around Derek Carr. I mean, the AB thing would have been really interesting to see how that played out. With him and Josh Jacobs, that would have been, something special. But I just don't see, unless they're going to get a top-tier quarterback, right? Unless they're getting Tom Brady or Dak Prescott, I don't see it being worth it. I really don't. There's some other interesting quarterbacks that like Cam Newton in that situation could be interesting. I don't know. But, it would be a matter of if Cam can stay actually healthy. But I just don't see it. another. I was just looking at this list of quarterbacks, and of course Phillips' name is on there. Oh my God! If Phillip Rivers went to go play for the Raiders, like, and would he do that out of spite? Yeah, I mean, if he starts throwing picks, but if he turned around and started being like, "Oh, Phillip Rivers," I'm like, yo. So
They got Tyrell Williams there.
Ultimately, no. I think they should focus more on building around Derek Carr, trying to get a decent receiver in that lineup. But I think they should stick with him until at least give him another season. See how that plays out.
Well, good. That kind of brings us into our next question from Chris Roberts. His was giving a little bit of insight on the quarterbacks that are going to be coming into free agency, and just if we had a quick overview on where we thought that a couple of them, let's say, the top 2 or 3, 4, might go. Tony, you have any insight on those?
I mean, obviously we got Tom Brady. So, well, first off, thanks for the question. Awesome. We got Tom Brady. I don't know. To me, I wouldn't want him on my team, but I know a lot of teams do. I think he stays in New England. I just don't see that relationship ending, but I know everybody else kind of does, and I just don't. I don't know why he would leave. Like, what's the perk? What's the benefit? Unless you're like really like Giselle is coming down and saying like, hey, we got to move to Miami or we got to move to LA. Like, I don't see a reason why he would leave. Dak Prescott is obviously very interesting. Like, I mean, but rumors are that he's already been offered more money than anyone else in league history for the Cowboys, and hey,
let's go back.
Everybody hates the Cowboys, so
fantasy.
Let's leave him there.
No, we're not gonna leave him there.
Yes, we are.
So this dude Dak Prescott was offered basically the same contract that Carson Wentz was offered. Carson Wentz, granted, was not the Super Bowl winning quarterback, but was in MVP discussion that year before getting hurt.
Should have won MVP.
Could have. I love Russell Wilson. He's one of my favorite players in the league. Russell Wilson threw 34 touchdowns. Carson Wentz threw 33 in 12 games. So, I mean, that he was balling that year. Basically every year, including this year, when after he got paid, he carried the team when there were injuries, when they were, weren't playing well. Granted, it was on a stretch against teams that weren't the greatest to get them into the playoffs, but you still had drug them kicking and screaming to the playoffs. Once again, franchise quarterback is a guy who's supposed to be able to carry your roster when the chips are down. Carson Wentz did that. Dak Prescott was offered $3 million less. During this season, Dak Prescott had great running game, great passing game, great defense. They were in one of the worst divisions in football, and they were 8-8. I don't understand how you think that in a division where the Eagles are going to continue to be good, the Giants hopefully can get their acts together. The Redskins will probably be the worst of those teams for the next, decade or so, but they might have a up year or so here or there. That this guy is going to carry your team as the rest of his weapons get worse. People around him aren't getting paid, so they're going to leave in free agency. I don't understand why they think we need to just shell all of this money out to him. If he doesn't want to take it here, franchise him, see what you can get out of this year, trade him away if you can. A team like the Dolphins has 3 first-round picks. Hey, would you be willing to give us 2 of those first-round picks, or 1 first-round pick, a second-round pick, and a first-round pick next year for Dak? Go along those routes. Do not eviscerate your cap space by signing a guy who, number one, doesn't want to be there for adequate money. You're talking about one of the top contracts that we've ever seen. And number 2, a guy that has everything going perfect around him, and you're only 8-8 in a trash division. Sorry, I couldn't pass that up because this is an awful awful turn of events for them, because if they just signed him last year at a smaller contract, maybe they don't get to this point. Maybe they catch him before he hits his career year, and now he wants more money than what he's deserved. I mean, more power to you, Dak Prescott. Get what you think you deserve because you are a quality football player. But this is not how you build teams, and this is not how you have success in the league. So if they want to pay him whatever that they're going to pay him, like, we're going to continue to watch the Dallas Cowboys talk about, remember that one time where I won Super Bowls, while they continue to not be good.
How about this? Trade him to the Raiders. 2 first rounds. You can sign Amari. You know John Gruden doesn't like Carr. Doesn't like any of his quarterbacks. But trade him for Carr. Get 2 picks. Draft a receiver and sign Amari.
Hey.
Or draft Jalen Hurts, who's basically an even comp.
Bro.
On a rookie
Jalen
contract.
Hurts.
Keep your line together. Keep your defense together. Pay your defense. And maybe you got a shot. They're not going to win if they pay Prescott
No.
$30 million plus a year.
No.
They're going to have to take apart that young defense, which has been good. The O-line has been good on the inside, interior especially. They're going to have to take that apart. And they're probably not going to be able to sign Amari Cooper, who they gave up a lot for.
And just to clarify my point, I'm only saying pay that dude the money because I want to see the Cowboys suck for the next 5 years. Everybody hates the Cowboys.
Yeah.
The only the guarantee is that if they pay Dak $35 million a year, whatever it is, they are not going to be able to afford anyone else, and they're going to suck for the next 10 years, and I'm going to love every second of it. But yes, I mean, I'm very anti-pay quarterback, as I've discussed with these guys, and we'll probably get into it on a different podcast, but I'm very anti-pay quarterback. I don't think any quarterback should be making that much money, and so it's really interesting, and I think the Cowboys are idiots for entertaining it.
Goff.
But
Right.
yeah, Jared Goff.
Right. If we had a podcast this time last year, Tony would have looked like a Nostradamus. Like, Tony in the offseason said, do not pay Jared Goff. He's a quality quarterback, but he's more of a system guy. And he said that nobody's going to want to do it, but you should consider trading him for assets, getting a new quarterback, whether it was a rookie or a guy off the free agent market. Blake Bortles could have done 70% of what Goff would have done at 15% of the contract. I mean, that's exaggeration. Probably, 40 to 50% of the contract. But, I mean, it would have given you the opportunity to sign a couple more guys. And also, it resets the narrative of, we got to pay these guys because what are we going to do without them? Like, we're going to give Kirk Cousins all of this money. You don't have to do that. We're going to give Ryan Tannehill all this money. You don't have to do that. Like, don't give these guys money and keep being mediocre. Like, if you're going to give Russell Wilson the money because Russell Wilson is carrying your franchise year in and year out, okay, that's what you got to do because he's carrying your franchise year in and year out. If you're going to give it to Carson Wentz, great. If you're going to give it to Aaron Rodgers, great. But if you're not one of those dudes, don't give them the money. It's very simple.
Trade bait. You could have got everything you traded away to get Jared Goff. After he made it to the Super Bowl, you say, hey, we got this great young coach. We believe in this young coach. We think he can coach up. Look at the quarterbacks that have gotten paid because of Sean McVay. Mm-hmm. Like, this dude can coach up any quarterback and make them look good. So if you traded Jared Goff, you could have got your 2 first-round picks, and your 3 other picks that you traded away to trade up to that number 1 spot. You could have got all that back and put Blake Bortles, compare Blake Bortles and Ryan Tannehill. You give a beastie running back to Blake Bortles and a pretty good offensive line, and he's performing exactly the same as Jared Goff. Maybe a little bit worse, but chances are pretty close to exactly the same, and you're only paying him $8 million a year instead of 29 or whatever he's at now.
Blake Bortles was Ryan Tannehill a couple years ago, folks.
It's the same situation.
He was in the AFC Championship game. In case we didn't remember, they were one bad ref call over a Patriots fumble that they should have taken back for a defensive touchdown, would have iced the game away from being in the Super Bowl.
And who wanted to watch Blake Bortles on the Super Bowl?
Absolutely. The same amount of people who wanted to watch Ryan Tannehill on the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Exactly.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, you can have success if things all go right, and that's what you want. It's a team game. But you're not paying these quarterbacks, these quote-unquote franchise guys, as part of the team. You're paying them 20 to 30% of your cap. If that's going to be the case, you have to be able to carry 20 to 30% of the load, and these dudes are not those dudes.
And so I want to touch on. We got time for one more quarterback. I'm gonna go, to me, kind of one of the most, kind of the weirdest, like most interesting, is Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater, a guy who came from my Minnesota Vikings, blew out his entire knee, every ligament, everything in his knee, got cut, let go, whatever happened, went to New Orleans, is the backup in New Orleans. Drew Brees went down. Teddy Bridgewater comes in and performs really well this year in his time. Drew Brees comes back, he gets knocked back down. But what do you do as the Saints when you are entertaining this Taysom Hill idea? And then what do you do as a league? Like, can...
You hate Taysom
but look at, like, the Cowboys. Cowboys is a great example. Teddy Bridgewater, Dak Prescott. Is Teddy Bridgewater at $8 million a year a better quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys than Dak Prescott at 33?
Absolutely.
He's better.
35.
He's better with what you can do with that
other
extra money.
Yeah.
If you're not pocketing the money and not doing anything, then yes, he's better. If you're going to just pocket it like some franchises have, like, oh, we're going to save money here, but then not do anything with it, then of course Dak is going to be he's a better player. But yes, to your point, yes.
But he's not that much better. Yeah, he might be. You know, it could have
He's
been
not $23 million
No,
better.
it could have been partially. The Saints were well put together,
Mm-hmm.
and Sean Payton did a good job when he went 5-0 this year. But he's not that much better. $23 million better when you can bring everyone back with him.
Yeah.
I think the big thing, though, is that you have to kind of evaluate what Teddy Bridgewater would make this coming year as a free agent, though, because he's not going to make $8 million. He's going to make, like, people are talking about him being like a $25 million quarterback, which, like, I think is asinine, but, like, for Teddy Bridgewater.
Oh, I mean, for what team?
I mean, there's been plenty of
Teams
reports
are
by
afraid.
players that are like, hey, he could be the next. Like, I think that if you're looking at Teddy Bridgewater at $18 million, like, I think that that's fabulous for 3 years or 4 years while you try to figure out your quarterback position. If you're one of those teams that's kind of holding on your future, like, you're not really in your Super Bowl window, but you're not really in I'm blowing everything up mode, like, if you had Teddy Bridgewater on your team and you were grooming a quarterback for 2 years, like, I think Teddy Bridgewater is a great quarterback to pair with, like, Tua. If you needed, in an ideal world, I 100% agree with you, because there should be tiers of you're a backup, you are a starter who could play 5 games for me, you're a starter who could play 1 season, you could play 2 seasons, you can play 4 seasons, and then you could be a decade kind of guy, and then a once in a generational, franchise kind of guy. And there should be kind of tiers, but it kind of seems like, okay, well, this guy got paid this amount of money and I'm the next guy, so I'm going to make, if not that, I'm going to make a couple of notches down. And unfortunately, that's the reality of it. So this next question we had from John, it's kind of broken up in a couple of parts, but this one's for Kyle. Could you discuss a little bit about who should trade up and who should trade down in the draft really quickly? And then talk about how much free agency is going to affect those kind of decisions. And lastly, what's the most important part about grabbing the best available player and not reaching for a need?
Well, I think it all depends on your organizational structure. Do you have something in place where year in and year out you can decide one who's good and who's not? Because clearly some teams are able to hit better in the draft than others. So if you know how you're scouting these guys, because GM, coach usually are in tandem, should be in tandem. I bet you don't always see that with how some of the hiring process goes. But first you want to make sure everyone's in tandem. Do we need this particular position, this particular player? Teams who want to trade up usually is going to be a quarterback-driven decision. You don't see a lot of that, especially early first round for a guard or someone not particularly impactful as a quarterback. But you like to see everyone in step, in line, having a vision of where they're going. So from there, you can make good decisions for the team. And then was it asking about like player rankings or?
Yeah, like the importance of grabbing the best player instead of reaching for a need, and then who you thought like should trade up versus trade back.
So yeah, all the teams are going to have different feelings on who's the best. Ideally, you would be able to get into a spot where both there was a need and the best player. Obviously, that doesn't happen all the time. I think need is going to end up trumping best player early in the first round, early in the draft. Best player, you see a lot of these guys sinking down, whether it's bad combine stuff, bad off the field issues. That's when I think you want to attack best player from there. Teams that will be trading up, I think you see the Dolphins trying to move up to get their guy. A lot of stuff coming out, either Tua or Herbert. I think they're trying to play it pretty close to the vest on who actually they want, but I think you could see them leveraging a couple of those first round picks or a first and a second to get up for the guy they actually want.
Right.
Take Tua, please.
Yeah.
Please take Tua.
Yeah, either way.
At 5, take him at 5. Just
Exactly.
don't trade up for him.
Yeah, as long as they know who they want. Like you said, the Jared Goff thing, if they wanted Goff, they went up and got him.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really believe in the process of what you're doing and what you're going to be able to do as a unit, coaching staff, scouting, general manager, I have no problem anyone moving up. I could even really see the Chargers trying to get up if they wanted their guy, whether it's going to be Herbert.
Nah, they take Herbert, please. We talked about this on the last podcast.
Take Herbert if that's your guy, or
Do you, in your opinion, do you only trade up for a quarterback, or do you trade up for other guys?
No, if you have really specific needs, so say you're sitting around kind of past that 10-12 mark where all the tackles are going to be gone, if you really need an O-lineman, you believe in one of the guys, could see you trading up for that. Lower in the draft, it would take a little bit more to get into that middle range, especially you look at some of those teams that do need tackles, and I think projected 4 or 5 pretty early. That could be a range you'd be looking for. But specifically, the quarterback I think can have the most impact early, especially if you're going to trade a lot of picks and you believe in that guy.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, though, when you kind of said that you have to understand your process and you have to understand where you're at as an organization. Trading up for a player when you're not in your winning window doesn't make the most sense because you're losing swings at the plate. You hear that analogy a lot. Like, this is an inexact science. Like, I can talk about players, and all of us in this room can talk about players, and we have no idea if they're going to be good or not. It's lottery tickets, and some of them have better odds at pounding out, and sometimes where they go is going to be the end-all be-all of their career. So if you're in a winning window and you need some guys to kind of complete the process, like, I think you're going to see more of those teams trading up. More of those teams trying to put themselves and position themselves into making some noise. You're going to see the better teams trade back just because they already have established rosters, and while they can establish a player by trading up in their window, they also know like, hey, I have a strong roster, so I can try to trade back. So I think you said that earlier. That's the big one, is kind of knowing where you are, whether or not it's a good idea for you to trade up or not.
Right, as long as you have a plan. Say you need a corner, you could trade your whole draft if you think one corner or one whatever position is going to put you over the top.
Mm-hmm.
But just hey, we want Okuda. We're going to trade everything. But if nothing else is in line, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do some stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, some of those teams that has worked for, the Rams thought they were ready to go. They got the quarterback. Everything kind of fell into place.
Mm-hmm.
But you see the Redskins a couple of years ago with RG3, they leveraged the whole draft, and their best pick was Kirk Cousins.
Mm-hmm.
It worked for 1 year, but it will ruin you if you aren't ready to handle some of the lack of picks later on, especially what it's going to cost to move up.
Right. All right. Well, our last one was given by Tim. This one was an interesting request. It was kind of talking about an underrated list of free agents that if they signed with another team, that they would help that new team. More of kind of like a deeper dive into some overlooked type of players. So I took a look at some of the top 50s. I mean, everybody has their list of the top free agents. I looked at Sporting News' list, and I tried to go with some players that weren't on their top 50. So a couple of those dudes, and I picked the guys that were controversial. So a couple of them, one was Nelson Aguilar. He's had memes put out about him. He's had people that come out and talked about his hands and his ability to catch the ball. We've seen him be able to have starring roles when guys like Alshon Jeffrey have been hurt. And, we've seen him have some success, and we've seen him fall flat on his face a little bit. I think a guy like Nelson Aguilar is a very intriguing player because he has a talent, he has a route running ability, he has the ability to, be scheme versatile. And the big thing for him is just like the consistency. And I think maybe a new place would maybe help his confidence a little bit. The Dolphins have kind of been my surrogate second fantasy or football team. I think a team like
Why?
got that Preston Williams
out there.
Preston Williams fan.
Preston Williams fan club president right here.
There's 30 other teams that you can choose from.
I think a guy like Nelson Aguilar could really help them out in the slot. They have Jakeem Grant, a guy they paid a lot of money to, but is more of a glorified kickoff and punt returner. But he can kind of establish a role there and be successful there. I kind of feel like you have guys like Jordan Howard, who's going to be a free agent for the Eagles. He's been successful in the NFL. He's not your prototypical, 3-down running back, but he is strong in the run game. He is pretty stout on third downs and picking up blitzes and things of that nature. And he's an underrated pass catcher. I feel like he would be a good player for the Chargers to pick up. They have Austin Eckler to do the heavy lifting, and I don't think Justin Jackson is a competent enough second running back. So Jordan Howard could be the guy who is going to score in the goal line, take some heat off of Austin Eckler. But he's not good enough, or he doesn't have enough prestige that people have to worry about him challenging Eckler for the number one position. I think he would fit in very well with what they want to do there. And the last one, I know I'm going to get a little bit of pushback here from my man Tony, but the last one is Xavier Rhodes. Yeah, we talked about him in the last podcast, and he has some serious issues with his confidence, and he has some serious issues with what the team asked him to do. Xavier Rhodes is not Patrick Peterson. He's not one of these guys who's going to be shadowing players, but if he were to play for like the Seahawks, who are a cover 3 heavy scheme, a team where they allowed guys like Brandon Browner to be, top level corners when they couldn't move laterally at all. If he were to play with a team like that, where he could do a lot of bail, a lot of playing the ball at his high point and just playing his third, I think that he could be successful at a team like that was going to ask him to take on a more limited role as a corner instead of being like your number one follow and shut down guys, because until he gets more confidence and until he improves some of his fluidity and coverage, like he's not going to be able to stay with guys who can make quick twitch moves and run all over the field. So
do you think he could fill in? Do you think his skill set's diverse enough to fill in more nickel, where it may ask him to cover a tight end? I don't know about his tackling, but he's a big body, kind of working with some tight end type stuff.
So I think
nickel, like a strong safety almost.
I think it would have to be that. Like I think it would have to be package specific, because your nickel corner usually has to be your best corner.
Right.
He has to have your best movement skills. He has to be able to go inside and out. He has to be able to go across the formation when they're shifting and things of that nature. If you're playing against a Travis Kelce, I think that he could do something to run with a guy like that. But if you're asking him to play nickel and play against Julian Edelman, he's getting torched.
Yeah, you'd have to be nickel
that's game
specific
time for
against
Julian
a tight
Edelman.
end for sure.
Yeah.
But you could see him playing maybe a field corner where you're playing more of the zone concepts, not so isolated, and then package-wise, package-specific, working inside a little more.
Right.
If it is a tight end that you're worried about, or you don't want to put a linebacker on it.
It's like double dutch over here. Tony's trying to jump in. He's waiting his turn.
All I have to say is, you said, all what we wanted, he was being asked to do things by the team. All he was being asked to do, that dude fell down more than anyone that I've ever seen. Any professional athlete, just is on the ground, and you're like, whoa, what are you, why? That you're playing on turf. There's no holes, it's in a dome, there's no weather, and one just bop, and you're on the ground? Oh, I don't remember how many times I saw that dude just on the ground this year. I don't care who he goes to. I mean, I never hope for, this is the dude's livelihood. You don't want to see him unemployed, but man, I'm glad he's off my team.
Oh man. Well, there you have it. I knew Tony was gonna love that Xavier Rhodes throw in. Save the best for last. We have any housekeeping? Anybody have anything else to drop?
Good.
Probably getting into more draft coming up.
Yeah. We're gonna have some more draft coming up. It's gonna be. I think we're looking like we're going to post once or twice a week. Right now we have free agency right around the corner. That's going to drastically change where some of these players might end up going with the coronavirus kind of shutting things down. A lot of these player visits are getting canceled. The NFL just put a kibosh on any player visits. Only online communication as of right now. Excuse me. So we have a lot of players who might have been on the bubble, like the big time guys already got their visits fit in for the most part. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see how things kind of unfold. So we'll be back. We'll be discussing that a little bit more. We'll do some mock drafts here. We'll kind of figure where we think some of these players should go once free agency kind of gives us a little bit more clearer of a picture. But until then, you can continue to find us at social medias like Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. You can email us in. You can subscribe, follow, all of those things, so that way we can continue to bring podcasts like this to you guys' ears. So until then, this is Dante,
Kyle,
Jamar,
and Tony.
and we're out.